All right, we talk about this a lot. Georgia's annual rivalry with Georgia Tech, and should the Jackets be dropped? We're going to talk about this in a second. This is something that Mike Griffith, who covers Georgia for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, said on the radio the other day. This is the team Georgia should be playing every year, not Georgia Tech. Clemson should be their annual rival. Matt?
I mean, they used to be rivals. They're not rivals anymore, right? I guess they're rivals on the recruiting trail, obviously. But I mean, yeah, people would love to see them play every year, especially. I mean, it would be cool for college football, but I don't think Clemson wants to play Georgia every year. I don't think Georgia wants to play Clemson every year. It's tougher for both teams to go on a national championship run. That's what playing the game is all about, winning a championship. And if you're going to make Georgia play Clemson every year to go along with their SEC schedule, and then you make Clemson play Georgia, I mean, yeah, it's cool every once in a while because there is some old school rivalry there. These programs know each other very well, used to play, have great historic games in the 80s. So, yeah, it's cool that they play every once in a while, not an everyday or year deal, Dean.
I just
Uh,
it's the one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard in my entire life, and of covering Georgia. Let me give you some background here. So whenever I talk to these folks at Georgia, who I bring up the notion of Georgia Tech and Georgia, and will they continue to play forever? I mean, they're not in the same league, so obviously, and they did not play one another in 2020. There's so much going on here that needs background. First of all, Tech and Georgia have played since the 1890s or whenever it was. So they're not going to stop playing. I mean, that's just not going to happen, which means they're not going to play Clemson. Secondly, if Tech and Georgia, one of the two, tried to back out, the state legislature would make them play. They are going to play, period. Finally, the people at Georgia, they have no interest in dropping Georgia Tech to play someone else. Then there's this whole, the notion that Georgia would get rid of Georgia Tech, or I hear people say, well, let's get Vanderbilt out of the SEC. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, Vanderbilt's a charter member. So these are not things that are based in reality. These are notions that I hear online often that are, how can we make schedules as difficult as possible? And I'll take your reaction from that, and then I'm going to talk about this from the Clemson perspective, which I think I know pretty well too.
well, I think there's a different satisfaction for Georgia fans beating Georgia Tech compared to everyone on the schedule. Beating Georgia Tech feels a little better than beating Clemson, and Georgia's had a solid run, kind of
Why don't,
destroying
why
Tech
don't you why
lately.
don't you
But
try why don't you try mixing in a loss to Clemson versus a loss to Georgia Tech and see the difference?
yeah, yeah, you lose to Georgia Tech, your job's on the line. So and again, it's something the state needs. It's something everyone looks forward to after Thanksgiving. Georgia Tech. You've got families together still
Yeah.
from Thanksgiving. People watch the game together. You got that fall kind of feeling. And recently, it's been kind of a tune-up game for Georgia before they play in the SEC title game. It's been that way for a few years, but there's something different about it. We saw it this year. It's different not ending the regular season against Georgia Tech,
Yeah.
and it's not the same. It's not the same. I was itching to play the game, and it's good for college football for all these in-state kind of rivalries who are in opposite conferences to come together at the end and play. I mean, it's clean, old-fashioned hate. It's a game that's usually fun to watch. And early in the Mark Richt years, those were some real battles, and those are games that you remember. And it'd be tough to just completely say, no, we're not playing Georgia Tech every year, but let's play Clemson, who is playing, they're in their
Yeah,
heyday
it
right
just
now of their program.
well,
And
but even
let's make
just
things difficult. Yeah.
well, it makes no sense. I mean, Georgia and Clemson don't play in every major sport like Tech and
Right.
Georgia do. And there's a reason why Tech and Georgia play one another. There's a reason why Carolina and Clemson play one another. First of all, the state legislature of South Carolina would never, ever, never, never, ever, never, never, ever let Clemson end its season with Georgia. The power in that state is with the people at the University of South Carolina in the legislature. They're going to make Carolina and Clemson play, period. Now, that, I mean, what is this discussion? Why don't we just mix in Florida State? I mean, why not just play Florida State every year, Matt? I mean, they border
And again,
Georgia.
This is
This
at
is,
the end of the year. I
I mean,
mean, it's one
I
thing
don't.
if they play at the beginning of the year each year instead of
That's a
at the
different
very end. But
conversation. But talking
yeah,
about dropping Tech, I mean, look, there's the problem here is what we've gone into in the issue more than anything in college football these days is we really are getting rid of tradition, and that's not okay. But we've already brought Missouri into the SEC. You know, we're playing games in Middle Earth, but one thing that Georgia is they're not Georgia Tech and vice versa. One thing Georgia is they're not Auburn and vice versa. And one thing Georgia is they're not the Gators and vice versa. Georgia doesn't think about Clemson. It's not an institution that it's not in state, it's not in the conference. It may as well be Louisville. Now they're really good at football right now. But let's not act like, um, Georgia Clemson's something that it's not. It has been a rivalry that Georgia, if you want to call it a rivalry, I don't. But if Georgia can't have a rivalry with everybody, man. So
yeah.
you know if we're talking about playing Clemson more often, well, we're going to see that over the next decade. If we're talking about dropping Georgia Tech, period, I don't, that is not a real discussion. It's not based in reality. If Mike had his way, Georgia and Florida wouldn't play in Jacksonville. I mean, so that's not, I mean, we gotta live in reality here. And what makes Georgia Georgia is what Georgia does.
Does Georgia need to play the Georgia Tech game more than Georgia Tech needs Georgia?
Georgia,
It feels like Tech needs the game more than Georgia
I think
does,
they
but
do. Yeah, I think they do. But when you talk to Georgia officials, what they say is that, I mean, if you float the notion of Tech, I do this every now and then. I do it periodically, and they just laugh. Like there's no way Georgia would ever drop Georgia Tech. It's just not going to happen. So I mean, think about all Georgia gets out of that. They get playing a Power Five school at the end of the year that they have dominated for 50 years. Why would they change that out for anyone?
and still important.
It is
I
important.
mean, it's expected to win, whereas back in the day it could be 50-50. Georgia would usually win the game, but it's still an important game.
Yeah.
That's a game that if you want to keep your job, you had to win. And again, still, if you
Yes.
lose to Georgia Tech, that's a big black eye. That's a no-no. It's I mean, it can't happen.
But
So it is important to both sides, but you
you
can't
can't,
drop them for Clemson and do that every year.
you can't, Clemson wouldn't be Clemson without South Carolina. I mean,
I mean, that's a big rivalry too. They
that's a
don't
huge
they
game for
love
them.
beating South Carolina at the end of the
Yes.
year each year now. They love it. That's one of their favorite
Yeah, I
things
mean,
about the year. But
my in-laws are all Clemson people, and I know very well what we're dealing with here. I lived through the 5 years of losing to South Carolina when Dabo Swinney was almost run out of town.
yeah,
That you want to mix in a loss to South Carolina for Clemson? That is about as miserable as it gets for them. I'm not sure if it's worse than when Tech beats Georgia, but it's close.
yeah. And you can't tell me Clemson folks would say, "Oh, let's trade
What?
Georgia for South Carolina." I mean, there's no
No,
way.
there's. I
Like
mean,
it's very cool. It's something to look forward to every few years, and they've definitely had some battles.
but this
But
dude. This is what this is and it's not exclusive to Mike, but it's this notion that Georgia Tech is not on Georgia's level. That's not the point. That's not the point at all. They're two very, 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 very different institutions in terms of what they do. The culture of the schools are very different. One ag based, one engineering based. Neither with medicine, but the two schools are critically important to the future of the state, and to for one to try to ignore the other is, I mean, Tech always has always thought and will always think they're better than Georgia. That's part of the rivalry. But you know Georgia Georgia would not be what it is today without the rivalry with Tech. It just wouldn't. And growing up in Atlanta, maybe I have too much sort of respect, if you want to call it that, for the Tech Georgia rivalry. But the ridiculous notion of dropping Georgia Tech to play anyone else, it's just ludicrous, It's ridiculous. No one's talking about Auburn and Alabama dropping one another or Mississippi State. I mean, why? No one's talking about Clemson and Carolina dropping one another. That rivalry is what makes Clemson and Carolina. One thing that Clemson is not Carolina, which is the entire point.
You can't punish Georgia for beating Tech
No.
badly and soundly. I mean, it's not competitive anymore.
No.
Georgia should continue to run Tech out of town.
Neither is Oklahoma.
Future,
Oklahoma.
But it doesn't matter.
Neither is Oklahoma. Oklahoma State. Or I don't even know. Ohio State, Michigan's not competitive. Why don't we just dial up Ohio State to end the season?
Yeah. Well, I guess they have to play for the conference stuff, but I see your point. But just because it's not competitive doesn't mean you should just go away with it. But
no, it's
something Georgia fans always look forward to. It's part of the game. It's part of the regular season. It's part of Georgia Tech. It's what it is, and it should continue to be that way, no matter how lopsided it gets. And it's been pretty ugly the past few years, but that's Tech's problem. That's not Georgia's problem.
No.
And they shouldn't drop a rivalry game that they played for so many years just because Tech can't get it together.
You really think the state of Georgia's legislature is going to let the two teams that decide the Governor's Cup is going to stop? Are you nuts?
What happens to the trophy? Do they rename it and Clemson and Georgia can play for it? Do they just put it in the ad?
We're going to just throw it's going to be hosted in Elbert County? I mean, come on. Look, Clemson.
People take a lot of time building that trophy. I found out last week to build a Lombardi trophy or any type of trophy. It takes a lot of time and effort. People get their feelings hurt about it. So I mean, you can't just throw away a trophy.
One thing that makes Georgia special is its three rivalries. Auburn, Gators, Tech. They all got names. They're all centuries old. They all have their own special thing. God bless Clemson. They don't mean anything to Georgia, comparatively speaking, the same way Georgia doesn't mean anything to them. It's not the same. And so, it's a great intersectional, easy for me to say, rivalry, but it's not one of Georgia's true rivals. It's just not. And if we're going to do that, are we putting Clemson in front of Tennessee?
Yeah, they're rivals on the recruiting trail, but not on the field.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama and Georgia aren't really rivals. I mean, like, how long are we going to do this for? I don't know. Well, look, we'll see.
It's a big game.
I'm so aggravated right now. You can hear more of my aggravation over on the website.